I opened the front door on December 26th to find 17 wrapped boxes stacked on my porch. Every single gift I'd spent 2 months carefully selecting, wrapping, and delivering to my in-laws' house the day before. There was no note, no explanation, just my own handwriting on the tags staring back at me like an accusation. I stood there in my bathrobe, coffee going cold in my hand, trying to understand what I was looking at. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother-in-law. "We don't accept charity." Charity! She called my Christmas gifts charity? Let me back up, because this wasn't just about presents. This was the culmination of 3 years of me never being quite good enough for the family my husband married into. Or, more accurately, the family I married into when I said yes to David. My name is Sophie, I'm 31, and I'm a software engineer. I make good money, really good money. Better than my husband, actually, though that's never been an issue between us. David's a high school teacher, and he loves what he does. He comes home with stories about his students that make me laugh, and he's genuinely changing lives. The pay is terrible, but he's happy, and that's what matters to me. His family, though, that's a different story. David comes from what I can only describe as old money that ran out sometime in the 1980s. His parents, Richard and Patricia, live in this massive colonial house that's falling apart at the seams, peeling paint, a roof that leaks in 3 rooms, a furnace that sounds like it's practicing death rattles. But it's been in the family for 4 generations, so they refuse to sell it or downsize, even though the property taxes alone are bleeding them dry. They're proud people, painfully proud, the kind of proud that would rather freeze than accept help paying the heating bill. The kind of proud that serves you dinner on china that's worth thousands, but hasn't been replaced since 1952, half the pieces chipped or cracked. When David first brought me home to meet them, I thought we got along fine. I complimented the house, asked questions about the family history, brought a nice bottle of wine. Patricia smiled and thanked me, and Richard shook my hand with what seemed like genuine warmth. It wasn't until later, much later, that David told me what his mother had said after I left. "She's lovely, but she's very showy, isn't she?" Showy! Because I'd worn a cashmere sweater and driven up in my Audi? I should have seen the warning signs then. But I was in love, and I thought if I just proved myself, showed them I wasn't some shallow person flaunting money, they'd come around. I was so wrong. The first real incident happened about 6 months after David and I got married. We'd been living in the city, in a condo I'd bought before we met. It was a gorgeous place, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern kitchen, the works. I loved it, and David seemed happy there too, though he'd occasionally get this far-off look when we visited his parents' house, like he was homesick for something. That October, a massive storm came through and part of his parents' roof collapsed. Not just leaked, actually collapsed, taking out most of the master bedroom ceiling. The repair estimates came back around $40,000, and they didn't have anywhere close to that. They didn't even have homeowners insurance anymore because they'd let it lapse to save money. David was beside himself. His mother was trying to patch the hole with tarps, and his father was talking about doing the repairs himself, despite being 72 and having arthritis so bad that he couldn't open jars. "We should help them," I said to David one night as we lay in bed, listening to rain on our intact roof. "He won't accept it," he said quietly. "My dad basically hung up on me." "Can we just pay for it?" I said. "Hire the contractor ourselves?"
"Sophie, they'd never forgive us. You don't understand. They'd see it as us lording our money over them." But I couldn't just watch them live under tarts. So I tried something different. I called Patricia directly and told her I'd done some research, found a contractor who owed me a favor from a project I'd worked on, and he'd agreed to do the work at cost, only about $12,000, and we could all split it 3 ways. David would contribute $4,000, They'd contribute $4,000, and I'd cover $4,000. It was a lie, of course. The contractor was charging full price, and I was paying the entire thing. But I thought if I framed it as everyone contributing equally, their pride wouldn't be wounded. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's very generous of you, Sophie. Let me discuss it with Richard." 2 days later, David got a call. They'd decided to accept, but only if David and I took it as a loan that they'd pay back with interest. I tried to argue what was the point of help if they were going to stress about paying it back, but David begged me to just agree. So I did. The contractor fixed the roof. It took 3 weeks, and the house looked so much better afterward. I drove out there once the work was done, bringing a bottle of champagne to celebrate. Patricia met me at the door, but didn't invite me in. "Thank you for arranging the contractor," she said, her voice tight. "We'll have the first payment to David by the end of the month." "Oh, there's no rush," I started. "We pay our debts, Sophie. We're not the kind of people who take handouts." The way she said it made my stomach drop, like I'd insulted her rather than helped her. I mumbled something about it not being a handout and left, the champagne still in my bag. That night, David explained it to me. "They're embarrassed. They hate that they needed help, and especially that it came from you." "Why especially me?" "Because," he struggled to find the words, "because you represent everything they're not anymore. You have money, success, security. They used to have that, and now they don't. And having you swoop in to save them just highlights what they've lost." I wasn't swooping in. I was helping family. I know, but that's not how they see it. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself they'd come around once they got to know me better. But the coolness never quite thawed. Every time we visited, there was this tension. Patricia would make little comments like, "Oh, you bought a new car. Must be nice to have that kind of disposable income." Or, "I saw David is wearing a new watch. Early Christmas present?" That felt like tiny paper cuts. David insisted I was reading too much into it. His parents were just stressed about money, about the house, about getting older. It wasn't personal. But it felt personal. The second incident happened last Christmas, a full year before the gift-returning disaster. I'd agonized over what to get them, wanting to find something meaningful but not too expensive. Helpful, but not charity. I finally settled on a beautiful cashmere throw blanket for their living room, which was always freezing, and a coffee table book about the history of their town, since they loved local history. We opened gifts at their house on Christmas morning. David's sister Monica was there with her husband and kids. Monica's husband worked in construction, and they were scraping by financially. But somehow that was noble because he worked with his hands. I worked with my brain, and apparently that made my money suspect. When Patricia opened my gift, she smiled, this thin, brittle smile, and said, "How lovely. This must have been expensive." "Not too bad," I lied. The blanket had been $300. "I just thought you might enjoy it. We certainly can't afford luxuries like this ourselves, but then not everyone has your resources." The room went quiet. David's face flushed red. Monica suddenly became very interested in helping her kids with their toys. "Mom, Sophie was just trying to be thoughtful," David said quietly.
"Oh, I know, and we appreciate it. Though I do wonder if homemade gifts might not be more meaningful than store-bought luxury items." She was looking at Monica as she said it. Monica, who'd baked everyone cookies and knitted scarves. Beautiful, thoughtful gifts, and I'd complimented them sincerely. But the message was clear. Monica's gifts were acceptable because they came from labor, not money. Mine were somehow crass. I spent the rest of that Christmas feeling like I'd done something wrong, though I couldn't figure out what. On the drive home, I cried, and David held my hand and apologized for his mother's behavior. He promised he'd talk to her. I don't know if he ever did, but nothing changed. Throughout the year, I pulled back. visited less, kept conversations surface level, stopped offering help even when I could see they needed it. David noticed, but didn't push. I think he was relieved, honestly, not to be caught in the middle anymore. But then Christmas came around again, and I thought, maybe this year could be different. Maybe if I really showed them how much thought I'd put into their gifts, they'd see I wasn't trying to show off or make them feel small. I was just trying to love them the way you're supposed to love family. I started shopping in October. I thought about each person individually, what they loved, what they needed, what would make them smile. For Patricia, I found a first edition of her favorite novel that I'd tracked down through a rare book dealer. For Richard, a vintage fishing rod like the one he'd told me about losing in a move decades ago. For Monica's kids, educational toys they'd been wanting. For Monica, a spa day at a local place because David had mentioned she'd been stressed. For her husband, quality work gloves and a tool he'd been saving up for. I wrapped everything carefully, wrote heartfelt notes in each card, spent hours making sure the packages looked beautiful. David kept asking if I was sure I wanted to spend this much, not money, but emotional energy on people who'd been so cold to me. They're your family, I said. I want them to know I care. We dropped everything off on Christmas Eve, the plan being to do our own quiet Christmas morning together before joining them for dinner the next day. Patricia accepted the gifts with a stiff, "Thank you," and I left feeling hopeful. Maybe this would be the turning point. Christmas Day, we drove out there around 3 in the afternoon. I'd made a dessert, tiramisu, Richard's favorite, and David had reminded me 17 times not to mention how expensive any of the gifts were if they came up. But when we arrived, something felt off immediately. The gifts I'd brought were nowhere to be seen. The living room had presents under the tree, but none of mine. When we sat down to dinner, no one mentioned them. Not a thank you, not even an acknowledgement that I'd given them anything. I caught David's eye across the table, and he looked just as confused as I felt. Finally, as Patricia was serving dessert, not the tiramisu I'd brought, which was still sitting in its container on the counter, I couldn't take it anymore. "Did you all get a chance to open the gifts I brought yesterday?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. The silence that followed was excruciating. Patricia set down the pie server very deliberately. "We opened them this morning, yes." "Oh, I just didn't see," I gestured vaguely toward the tree. "We put them away." Put them away. Like they were shameful. Like they were something to hide. "Mom, what's going on?" David asked, his voice tight. Richard cleared his throat. "Son, we appreciate Sophie's generosity, but the gifts were inappropriate." Inappropriate? I felt my face getting hot. How were they inappropriate? "They were extravagant. Beyond extravagant. That book you got me is worth hundreds of dollars. The fishing rod, the tools, all of it, it's too much. It feels like you're trying to prove something." "I'm not trying to prove anything. I just wanted to get you things you'd love." "We don't need you to buy our love, Sophie." Patricia's voice was ice cold. "We're not a charity case."
There was that word again. Charity. "That's not what this is," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm part of this family. I wanted to give nice gifts. Is that a crime?" "You wanted to show off," Monica said suddenly, her voice sharp. "You wanted all of us to see how much you can afford and how little we can. Every gift was a reminder of our financial situation." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Patricia leaned forward. "You give us expensive gifts while we struggle. You drive your luxury car to our falling-apart house. You talk about your job and your income and your lifestyle, and then you're surprised when we feel uncomfortable? I never talk about my income. I've bent over backwards not to make you uncomfortable." Your very presence makes us uncomfortable, Richard said quietly, and the words hit me like a slap. David stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. Dad, that's enough. No, David, someone needs to say it. Your wife is a lovely person, but she doesn't understand our family. She doesn't understand that we have values beyond material wealth. And frankly, we're tired of feeling judged in our own home. Judged? I was standing now too, my hands shaking. I'm the one being judged. I've been judged from the moment we met. Nothing I do is good enough because I committed the terrible sin of being successful. We are not impressed by success, Patricia said coldly. We're impressed by character, by humility, by living within your means and not flaunting what you have. I'm not flaunting anything. I was crying now, which made me furious at myself. I was trying to show you I love you. By throwing money at us. That's not love, Sophie. That's buying people off. David grabbed my hand. We're leaving. David, her mother started. No, you don't get to do this. Sophie has been nothing but kind to you and you've treated her like garbage since day one. She helped fix your roof, she tries to be part of this family, and you can't get past your own pride long enough to see that she genuinely cares. We left. David was shaking with anger the entire drive home. I was just numb. That night, neither of us could sleep. We lay in the dark, and David kept apologizing, and I kept saying it was fine, even though it wasn't. They're going to return the gifts, I said suddenly. What? Your parents. They're going to send everything back. I know they are. They wouldn't. But I knew they would. And I was right. The next morning, there they were. 17 boxes, perfectly stacked on my porch like a wall designed to keep me out. Everything I'd bought, untouched. The gift wrap wasn't even torn. They'd opened them so carefully they could return them without a mark. And that text? We don't accept charity. I sat down on the cold porch steps, still in my bathrobe, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. I'd spent 3 years trying to win over people who decided from day one that I was the enemy. I edited myself, downplayed my success, tiptoed around their feelings, and it had never mattered. Nothing I do would ever be good enough because the problem wasn't what I was doing, it was who I was. David came outside and saw the boxes. I watched his face crumble. Sophie, I'm so sorry. Don't be. This isn't your fault. They're my family. I know, but you can't make them accept me. God knows I've tried. He sat down next to me on the steps, and we just looked at the boxes together. All that effort, all that hope, stacked up like a barricade. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. I thought about it. Really thought about it. And then I knew. I want to donate everything, every single gift, to families who'll actually appreciate them. David was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, let's do it. We spent the morning loading the boxes into my car. We drove to a family shelter on the other side of the city, the kind of place that helps families get back on their feet after hardship. The coordinator's eyes lit up when she saw what we'd brought. Are you sure? She kept asking as we unloaded box after box. These are such nice things. We're sure, I said. We want them to go to people who will use them.
We watched volunteers sort through everything. The book, the fishing rod, the toys, the tools. Families were coming in for donated Christmas dinners, and kids were being told they could pick something from the toy pile. One little girl grabbed one of the toys I'd gotten for Monica's daughter and hugged it to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. And I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been tight and painful for 3 years suddenly loosened. You okay? David asked. Yeah, I said, and meant it. I really am. On the drive home, David held my hand. I need to tell you something, he said. I've been talking to a therapist. About my family, about the dynamics, and she asked me something that I keep thinking about. What? She asked if I'd be willing to set boundaries with them. Real boundaries.
to tell them that if they can't treat you with respect, we won't be coming around. I looked at him. David, they're your family. And you're my wife. You're the family I chose. And I'm done watching them hurt you. That evening, David called his parents. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but it went something like this. Mom, we need to talk about what happened. No, I'm not going to calm down. Because returning Sophie's gifts was cruel. It doesn't matter if you didn't mean it that way. That's how it landed. No, she's not asking me to choose. I'm choosing, right now. Either you can find a way to accept Sophie as she is, successful, generous, and part of this family, or you won't be seeing much of us anymore. I'm not being manipulated. I'm standing up for my marriage. I love you too, but this can't continue. Call me when you're ready to apologize to her. Really apologize, not just smooth things over. He hung up, and his hands were shaking. Thank you, I whispered. You don't have to thank me for doing what I should have done years ago. We didn't hear from his parents for 3 weeks. Not a call, not a text, nothing. Monica sent David a furious message calling him brainwashed and saying I'd destroyed their family. He blocked her number. Then on January 18th, Patricia called. I wasn't there for the conversation, but David told me later what she said. She was sorry. Not sorry you were offended or sorry things got out of hand, but actually sorry. She'd talked to her own therapist, Richard had apparently insisted, and she was beginning to understand that her pride had poisoned her relationship with me from the start. She wants to meet with you, just you and her, to apologize in person. I agreed, though I was terrified. We met at a neutral coffee shop, and Patricia looked smaller somehow, older, tired. I was jealous, she said after we'd ordered. No preamble, just straight to it. Of you, of your success, of how easy things seem for you. Richard and I have struggled for so long, and watching someone young have everything we lost, it made me bitter, and I took that out on you, and I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to make her really feel what she'd done, but another part of me just felt sad for her. Things aren't as easy as they look. I've worked incredibly hard for what I have, and I've never once judged you for what you don't have. I know. I think I knew that all along, but it was easier to cast you as the villain than to face my own insecurity. She wiped her eyes. I returned your gifts because I couldn't stand looking at them. They were beautiful and thoughtful, and I knew I could never give you anything that nice, and it made me feel worthless. Patricia, I reached across the table, stopped myself, then did it anyway, took her hand. You could have given me a homemade card and it would have meant something if it came from a real place. I never cared about the value. I cared about being part of your family. She cried then, really cried, and we really talked for 2 hours about her childhood, about losing the Fortune farm, about how much pressure she felt to maintain appearances, about my own childhood, about working my way through college, about how success hadn't made me happy until I found David.
By the time we left, something had changed. Not everything. We weren't suddenly best friends, but something. Over the next few months, Patricia made an effort. Real effort. She started asking about my work with genuine interest. She invited us over for dinner and didn't make comments about our car. She even asked for my help setting up a budget, which I knew cost her every ounce of pride she had. Richard took longer, but eventually he came around too. Last month, he actually called me to ask advice about refinancing the house, and we talked for an hour about options and resources. At the end, he said, "Thank you, Sophie, and I'm sorry I was such a stubborn old fool." I donated the money they'd been paying back for the roof to the family shelter in their name. I never told them. Monica is still cold to me, but that's okay. Some relationships take longer to heal, and some never do. I've made peace with that. This coming Christmas, I'm planning something different. I asked Patricia what she'd like, and she said, "Just your company. That's all I want."
So, we're going over for dinner. And I'm bringing tiramisu because Richard loves it, and I'm not going to apologize for knowing how to make his favorite dessert. Here's what I learned from all this. Sometimes people's reactions to you have nothing to do with you. Patricia's anger was never about my gifts or my money or my success. It was about her own pain, her own loss, her own fear of becoming irrelevant. And I could have destroyed myself trying to fix that, but it wouldn't have mattered because the problem was never mine to fix. What I could do, what I did do, was set boundaries, stop shrinking myself, stop apologizing for success I'd earned, and give David the space to stand up for our marriage without guilt. The boxes showing up on my porch was the best thing that could have happened, honestly, because it made everything so clear. It forced the confrontation we'd been dancing around for years. And it gave both of us, me and Patricia, a chance to either do the real work or walk away. We chose the work, and it's been hard, messy, imperfect work, but it's real now. There's no more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, no more unspoken resentment festering underneath polite conversations. If you're dealing with in-laws who make you feel small, who resent your success, who seem determined to misunderstand you, I want you to know it's not your job to fix their feelings about themselves. You can be kind, you can be patient, you can extend olive branch after olive branch, but at some point, they have to meet you halfway. And if they won't, you have to decide what you're willing to tolerate. For me, seeing those 17 boxes was devastating, but it was also clarifying. And sometimes you need that clarity, even when it hurts. I don't know what your situation looks like, but I do know this. You deserve to be celebrated, not resented. Your success is not something to apologize for. Your generosity is not ammunition for other people's insecurity. And anyone who can't see that might not deserve a place at your table, even if it's Christmas.